I'm really excited to welcome this next panel. Super excited for this one. It's called Smarter Not Harder, Using Technology to Manage Properties More Efficiently and Successfully. Please join me in welcoming Julie Blank, Chris Rodriquez, Rey-Hipolito, Daniel Cunningham, and Alex McGillivary. Yes! Woo!
I'm Chris Rodriquez, VP of IT and Operations for Passco Companies. We're an owner-operator out of Southern California.
My name is Daniel Cunningham. I'm founder and CEO of Leonardo 24/7. We're a property and operations platform based out of Dallas.
Julie Blank, Chief Operating Officer for New Standard Equities. We are a vertically integrated real estate investment firm focusing on value-add multifamily.
Hi, I'm Cherre-Hipolito, Head of Residential for Kilroy Realty Corporation. We're a publicly traded real estate investment trust, mainly in office, and just recently started developing and delivering multifamily.
And I'm Alex McGillivary. I'm with Cherre. We're a data analytics platform or a data warehouse built specifically for real estate. We're kind of like Switzerland. We're agnostic to whatever data you use, whatever applications you use. And I thought it'd be perfect to kind of moderate this panel with technology representation and also owner-operators. So to kick things off with our first question, obviously real estate owners, really any industry these days, particularly real estate, are seeing themselves kind of scattered geographically, even some of the more regional players. And so what role can technology play in bringing multifamily management teams together? How are you all leveraging the technology, and what are the trends you're seeing?
I think intrinsically in our industry, it leads to natural barriers to efficiency because we are geographically dispersed. I imagine most of us in the room probably have properties in various cities and states, as well as our employees and potentially investors. So technology definitely has helped us bring people together, and it allows us to communicate, educate, stay informed, and build relationships. We've been able to do it within New Standard through employee portals, investor portals, training portals, as well as, of course, Zoom. And those are great technologies, but they lead to communication capabilities and information dissemination, but it doesn't always create that human engagement and human contact that's still needed in our industry, as property management being vertically integrated as operators. So we see technology as more of a supplement and not a substitute for what we do. So we really still focus on bringing people together. We have to remember that we're in real estate, and real estate's a real property, and we have to go visit our assets. And during those site visits, we're looking at the asset, we're looking at the property, we're seeing if it's meeting our expectations for our business plan. It also gives us an opportunity to create moments with our teams. Again, being vertically integrated, we have our own property management team, and so it gives us a chance to stay connected to them as well. And we find that with the technology being a supplement, and also with doing site visits, and we found our employees like our company events and still getting together physically. They enjoy the resident events. Again, still having that human connection and human contact. We think it's important. It's very important. I mean, even here today, we're lucky that we get together again, face to face, and rub elbows with each other, build new relationships, and foster existing ones. But if it wasn't for technology getting us here too, most of us probably had to use GPS. The email blast that went out letting us know about the conference, the online registration. There's a balance, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that there's a balance of using technology as well as still making sure that there's that human engagement.
Yeah, so that's sort of like a lot of the communication side of how you manage a geographically disparate portfolio. There's an operations piece, which has always been a challenge as well in multifamily real estate, or just real estate operations in general, and that is how do you get people in disparate locations doing your policies, executing against your policies and procedures, your inspections, your risk management, your preventative maintenance. How do you get them doing the right way, the right time, every time? That's always been a challenge, and I think technology has now come along that can help automate a lot of that for you. So you should be seeking out technology that allows you to get those things scheduled and presented to the right people at the right time, where you don't have to guess about the form you should be using or figure out which, on SharePoint, which form you're supposed to be using. And then you switch this dynamic. Like right now, the way we handle that is you have people doing site visits all the time, or you have people like texting or emailing or calling, like, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And that's not a great dynamic between sort of regional folks and the folks on site. So if you can use technology to be that intermediary that manages the minutia for you, and then your regional folks get very focused on the things that make you money, which is marketing, how's our occupancy rate, those sorts of things. Technology can empower that now, I think.
I would just add one more thing. It really is a supplement to. You have to look at it as a supplement to real contact. I know for us, we're in the middle of a software migration right now, and we're meeting with teams in person, and then building that connection initially, and then when we go back, then we use things like the portals or Teams or Zoom or whatever. But it's that initial contact I think that is really important, and that technology is going to supplement us throughout the year until we can meet them again, whether it's a couple months down the line or next year.
Great, thank you. And Jay, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I was kind of researching Kilroy a bit and saw, a lot of commercial, a lot of industrial assets. And please correct me if I'm wrong, because we did not talk ahead of this, but is multifamily kind of a newer endeavor? I just noticed that was kind of the smaller piece of the overall portfolio. Wondering if technology has had anything to do with that expansion into multifamily. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thanks. So no, you're right. We have about plus or minus 15 million square feet of office up and down the West Coast, and have recently entered into a new market in Austin. And I think technology and the way that it impacted how we think about multifamily is really the fact that who we're building office for is your Netflixes, your Dropboxes, your Indeeds and Apple and all the rest of them. And I think the way that they think about their student body had a significant impact on the way we think about the future of real estate. And as that, we've developed these mixed-use campuses. So all of our going back to your question, it is a relatively new endeavor for us. Over the last 4 years, we've developed 1,000 units between Los Angeles and San Diego. We've got a couple more in the pipe, generally in these very tech-forward or life science-oriented cities. And they want an experience for their student body that is seamless, and that includes the way that they live and the way they work together. I know a lot of the conversation earlier and from speakers and panels earlier have mentioned this integration of work and life and work and living. And I think that a lot of these technology forward companies, they've thought about it in a lot of different ways, and we're here to try to help provide that for them.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, I know sometimes people will look at a owner-operator investor and say, oh, they're getting into a different asset class. They may consider that style drift. I think what I'm hearing you say is that this is more of a complementary play to what you all have been doing since the beginning. So it kind of feeds hand in hand.
I think that's right. And I mean, the way that we've just described technology as something that's additive and not a substitute. I mean, that's the same way that we're looking at multifamily. That it's a great additive to what we're doing. It's a lubricant to making life easier for our main tenant base. 99% of our revenues come from office. That we want to make sure we keep the main thing.
Great, thank you. Well, Julie, you kind of led us into our next question relating to the human touch. Like, obviously, technology is making us work smarter, more efficient. But the number one complaint I think a lot of us hear about technology is how do we kind of fill that gap with the human touch? And I'm really interested to hear how you all are now with this kind of remote world that we live in, all this new technology rolling out, automation. How are you supplementing the human touch, not just for your residents, but also internally as a company, the employees?
Well, I'll go first. On the multifamily side, I can tell you that for us, implementing the technology is to kind of get rid or to eliminate kind of the repetitive, somebody else mentioned this, the repetitive, mundane activities that the leasing staff have to do. That's going to free up more time for them to take phone calls or to visit with residents instead of being in the back office doing paperwork, and even giving them a better quality of life at work, because they have to get all those duties done. They have to get those reports done. They have to log all that information in the system. If we can automate and take 15 minutes here, even 5 minutes here multiple times a day, we really are hoping that they're going to have a more enjoyable experience on property and connecting with residents.
That's interesting. I was kind of thinking along those same lines with my own experience. At one point in my career, going to the office every day, it's kind of like family sometimes. You don't always love each other, and it's nothing personal. You're just around each other all the time. But we meet once a month. And so now when we meet internally, rather than it being kind of like a family who's in a house every day, same day, every day, it's a special occasion every time we see one another. And so it's interesting to see how, we're removed day to day, but when we are together, or when you're on the property, it's a more enjoyable experience. So,
I think for New Standard, we are all back in the office, and it's important that we are together because it creates that collaboration and those organic moments that you can be creative versus going, I have to make an appointment and get on a Zoom, and then we can talk about. By that time, your creativity is just, it's gone. So we've had some challenges bringing people back to the office. We do have people who want to stay remote, but we've had to make those decisions and separate. But I'll speak more to the property management side because I think that's where we really have to look at that, the lack of human touch now that we're back together in our corporate office. Our prospects and residents have been conditioned to really want to do everything online. So we have all of the online amenities, the leasing, the prospect resident portals, the virtual tours, the no contact tours, all of that, which is great. But what we look at is that, hey, human touch just takes on a little bit different of a form. It may not be that face-to-face contact anymore where someone's coming to your office and you're sitting there, leasing agents walking them through all the pictures and the tours. By the time they come to your property, they're ready to sign a lease. They basically have made a decision. So the human touch that we look at is a little bit different. It's going to be through text messages and emails. It's going to be through chatbots. And even phone calls. People talk anymore on the phone. But to make it personal, to have that touch, we have to personalize those contacts. So it's not a template that goes out when someone emails or texts us. We train our associates to be very specific to the resident, to the prospect, so that it feels like it's personal. And it is geared towards the resident's personal need or personal want. And I'm sure we've all had emails and text messages, from people that felt like it was a human touch because it was personal. So that's really how we try to get around it. Still offering opportunities, obviously, for face-to-face engagement if our prospects and residents choose to. And we also have to be open to that as well because we have generations that don't have the technology to just be completely online or choose not to have the technology. So we train both ways.
And I would even piggyback on that to say that we have to look at it. Different customers have different levels of communication that they're comfortable with. There are some people who are fine or would prefer not to talk to a human being. They just want to text or go online and they're happy to do everything online. But there are people who do want that personal touch. And I think we kind of talk about it sometimes as an all or nothing game, and I think it's more that we have to have all those tools in our belt because we don't know who's going to walk into that door, and we need to be able to meet them wherever they're comfortable.
Yeah, this is still a people business at the end of the day. There might be a giant asset behind the investment, but it is about the relationships with residents. It's about that customer experience. So I think to the extent that we are seeing benefits from deployment of technology that remove people from the kind of the mundane, the administrative functions, right? I mean, there's no reason to have people continually in charge of setting appointments for people to visit the property, or if a chat bot can take that place. But what you do is then you reallocate that time to, I think, to specialized customer service functions. There's a number of our clients who are looking at actually providing centralized, removing some of the on-site folks that are now not as well utilized as they were before, because some of this is being automated, and centralizing them in a department that provides customer, like, response to complaints, response to work order requests, that sort of thing, in a centralized fashion where they do it better because it's all they do, so that you provide a better customer experience. At the same time, you're reducing kind of the minutia that falls on humans, which we're not good at, right? Technology is better.
Good point. And Jay, I'm curious, prior to working at Cherre, I was at a property management platform and worked mainly on the commercial side. Started to work on the multifamily side a little bit and noticed there was a lot more products and functionality around marketing and creating a feeling for the tenants. And not to generalize industrial or commercial clients, but it didn't seem like there was as strong of a need in that. Are you noticing kind of more marketing, more feeling-oriented technology, I guess more efforts geared towards that human emotion, that human touch in your world as you help expand that portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'd say is that companies like Google stewarded a friendlier place to work a long time ago, right? Company culture being critical to them, the way that people feel. And so maybe the best way to say it is that whether it's in multifamily or whether it's on our office side, we're always, and frankly, whether it's the way that we think about building some of the retail spaces that we have, we're always trying to optimize for connection. And we want to make, and technology is a significant part of that. And I think human touch, as Julie had mentioned, has taken on different definitions. It's not always in person, but we think that we don't want to, how do I put this? If people aren't comfortable where they work and live, if they're not feeling included, if they're not feeling like they have a friend, whether that's at work or in the neighborhood that they live in, then we haven't done our job.
Good point. Well, kind of shifting gears a little bit more towards data. I mean, people have been using data since the beginning of time to make decisions, and it wasn't always digital. It was back of the napkin conversations, and so on and so forth. But I'm curious, over the last 5 years, there's been an explosion in data and data providers. It's not just sales comps and lease comps. There's migration trends. You can buy information on social media sentiment. You can really think of any sort of data point and go procure that data. So I'm really interested to learn how data is being leveraged to make decisions for your property management teams, for your acquisitions teams, and if we could stay away from the traditional looking at sales comps, lease comps, and talk about other more unique, newer types of data, that would be even better to learn about from you all.
Do you want to take it? All right, I mean, so I'd say that we'll buy it all, particularly when we're thinking about new developments. We're in the design phase on a project right now, and we went to 3 different groups and asked them to provide us information, and that's anything from a third party, just call it very in-depth market analysis, all the way to our property management partners and getting their thoughts on a variety of data points. I caution all of us to be weary of just how much information is too much information, but obviously I think we don't want to just shoot from the hip. And multifamily is a tough one because we can sit around in a room, and particularly when you're developing a project, let's say you call it a group of 10 people between architects and developers and your construction teams and your operations teams, and everybody has a personal experience with, it's not like office. Everybody has a home or an apartment or a place that they where they live, and they have an opinion, and you can kind of maybe go too far with just building a building for yourself or for the people that are in that room. A lot of the information that we purchase helps us suss that out. and it allows us to make better decisions. And I think one thing to be careful of is, and we try to guard against, is that a lot of the information you get is, well, all of it is backwards looking, right? You're looking in the rearview mirror, and now you're trying to project a project and design a project that's 4 or 5 years out. And even the newest technology that you're talking about today, that you're thinking about implementing, will be, possibly, it may not be in vogue by the time you deliver. And so those are things that I can't speak to what's new and exciting in terms of the world of data. I'm the wrong guy to talk about that. But I will say that we are a buyer of it all, and we try to figure out how to make better decisions as a result of what we read and hear.
I think we are a little bit opposite of that. We are a buyer of few. We really try to do a combination of using third-party tools. We like tech tools that allow us to gather our operational and financial data so that we can analyze it, optimize it, benchmark it, and really use it for quick decision-making. So we've created our own in-house proprietary models, as well as using as a supplement third-party analytical tools to help us create those moments that, because there is so much data. And you're like, well, okay, it's great. We've got 15 spreadsheets and 5 different software systems giving us all this information. What is it telling us, and who's taking the time to do that? So we've really created these tools internally and externally that pulls the data together and is really more for our asset management team to look at it and determine, is it meeting our business plan? And the internal models that we created really helps bring all the different teams together that is important in executing the business plan. It was our property management team, our asset management team, construction management, our investment management team. So being vertically integrated, again, we're all in the same house, physically as well now too. But that's what we have found, is that we can create in-house models cheaper than going out and buying it. They may not be as sophisticated, but they work just as well when we bring all of the teams together. And then we do supplement it with external resources. There's just a lot out there.
Julie, is there anything besides like financial performance data, like performance against pro forma, that sort of thing? Is there anything that you guys are able to collect now to measure asset performance that you couldn't collect 5 years ago?
Oh, for sure. We're able to, because you're eliminating the human piece of it, you can get the real data, and hopefully with less human error. But we're able to pull together the operational stats, and it's rolled up in a concise way that it allows us to make quicker decisions. And again, there's fewer, if no errors, because you're not asking someone from the property level or on the operations team to pull together a report or a spreadsheet or something. So we find that the information has more integrity, it's more valid, and allows us to make quicker decisions.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You built your own essentially BI tool, which we see more and more clients feel like they're forced to do that because traditionally in our industry there hasn't been a great number of accessible BI tools that integrated with your PMS system. These BI tools are tough to build from scratch. It's a testament to your organization's commitment to it that they did it themselves. But that is getting better. So I would say one of the things to look for is more BI tools that have the flexibility to accommodate us as real estate operators are coming into market. So I think that's a good sign. And I think there's things now that we have insights into that we didn't have before that go beyond the P&L, that go beyond like what is our occupancy rate, what is our trended occupancy rate, what do we leased, how are we doing budget versus plan, how are we doing on our one thing that's still hard that I don't know if you guys have solved. One thing that we're hearing is still hard is tracking your rent lift in a value add property. That's still not easily done. That's still very bespoke. So there's still room to do better. There are other things now that you can measure that we couldn't measure before that I think are also important. So there's things looking at like risk management. Like, what are your expectations for your teams in the field to do risk management? Like, there's just no visibility into that before. Now you have the ability to say, what are the inspections that we performed? What deficiencies did we find? I think probably everybody knows about the balcony that collapsed in Berkeley, California a number of years ago, which has spawned a whole industry. If you're not doing this, you better be doing this. Like, start doing this tomorrow. A whole industry of risk inspections where you're going through and seeking out areas of liability. You need to be proactive about that. but it's been difficult to aggregate that data at a senior level and then turn it into something actionable. Technology is now allowing you to do that. So when you're looking at risk, we're looking at velocity of work orders, how fast are we doing work orders, where are those work orders being concentrated, do we have a particular piece of appliance that's a problem for us across our portfolio, that this refrigerator keeps going out. Those sort of analytics have been nearly impossible to do, are now getting easier, especially if you create something in-house. But look to BI platforms to do a better job of that going forward.
Okay, so you're saying, decision making is one thing, but I guess being enlightened to certain things that you couldn't notice previously kind of leads into more proactive activities. I'm curious to learn, because you, Daniel, come from both the business side and now founder on the tech side. Are there any data points your clients are using that you may have not anticipated they were going to use when you started this? Are there any surprises or things that may it makes sense after you notice that they're using these data points to make decisions or be proactive, but you didn't actually intend on that being kind of a benefit?
That's an interesting question. So I was before this, I was a director of asset management for Aimco, back when Aimco had the largest number of we were the largest multifamily REIT in the country back then. And so in that capacity, we were always interested in obviously checking the financial performance of the asset was primary, but sussing out risk to the portfolio was, I think, probably the thing that was most difficult for us, was the biggest unknown, especially in acquiring assets. So I would say one thing that we're seeing now that we didn't expect to be able to measure is the efficiency of the deployment of people on site. There's this kind of rule of thumb that we all go by when we think about staffing an asset. We're like, 50 units, you get one service guy. 100 units, you get two service guys. 150, now you need a leasing agent. Like, there's this formula we all go by that is not always borne out by the actual activity of that asset on the site. And if you're a third-party manager, or if you're using a third-party manager, there's tension about whether or not the property is overstaffed or understaffed. What you can do now, which we couldn't do before, is actually measure where your people are spending their time and do more workforce management, do more optimization. If you have sufficient scale at a regional level, you can start centralizing some maintenance. The data from what people are doing and how long it takes them to do that is now enabling us as real estate operators to be more efficient about our people. And I think you're going to see a trend, and I'm not giving anything away that I have superior knowledge on that's private, but you're going to see a trend in larger operators. So you have Greystar now, who has 1,200 properties across the United States. You have Pinnacle and Bozzuto, these that are going to continue their aggregation. I think you're going to see a trend when you have sufficient scale regionally that you can start pulling back from the day-to-day maintenance based on knowledge about what people do, where they spend their time, pull people back and centralize the maintenance, use workforce management tools to get them scheduled so that you can do more work with fewer people. And this is really apropos of what we're going through right now, because the Great Resignation, I think, has impacted our industry much more significantly than many others, because of a number of reasons. It's a tough industry. You're not paid very well as somebody out on site. You deal with a lot of bad things that people don't have to contend with in other industries. And so given the opportunity to do something new and do it from home, people are electing that option. So the ability to do more with less is, I think, going to be another thing that is going to be impacted by technology in a positive way, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. Taking a large company, the concept, and we're not naming any companies in particular, but your thoughts around kind of centralizing when trends have been going more towards decentralizing, and it kind of leads into another one of the questions about how technology is helping with the labor shortage. And initially, when I signed up for this panel, I noticed, okay, a lot of the guests are regional, and I thought, how are we going to talk about geographic disparity? But the first thought that came to mind was the whole shortage of labor. And I'm curious how technology has impacted the hiring practice, even if you are regional. Are you expanding? Maybe Chris or Jay, you want to speak about that a little bit?
Go ahead, Chris.
I didn't quite understand the question. Can you just, like, what specifically are you looking for?
Well, if you're leveraging technology at all to address the labor shortage, and maybe you all are just fine with hiring, but if you weren't, are you more open, I guess, today due to technology to hire outside of the western part of the country than you were maybe a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's definitely we stick to the region. But what I would say is that what we're finding is that as people embrace these technology in general, a lot of times we talk about these technologies and everybody wants to talk about how specialized and how different everyone is. But really what it's about, I think, is a shift in how people are working and actually using the technology. I know one of the challenges we have is just what I would call almost like low-hanging fruit, which is just getting people to fully embrace the technology and use it the way that it is supposed to be used so that the data that's in there is actually actionable, right? And that's part of the reason why for us, we're moving to our own property management software instead of using the third parties, because we're not getting consistent data across the board. And so, we're really excited about this because, we, for lack of a better way, explanation, we have a Passco way of how we like things done. And, if we can, now that we're in the control of that technology stack a little more and we can, train the people the way we want to, I think to answer your question, I guess we feel that what it will allow us to is when somebody comes in, it will maybe allow us to be a little bit more open because we have this stack, we have processes in place, and if you follow those processes, and if you've been in this industry, you've used probably all three of the big property management softwares, you'll be able to step in and you'll know how important it is for you to use all these tools and you'll be appreciative of the optimizations that make your life easier and just would make it easier to run properties in general.
And just to clarify, so are you having like your managers use your own in-house property management tool as opposed to maybe them sending their reports to you?
Correct. That was part of the driver for us. We have 10 different management companies. So trying to, there are tons of great things that we can look at and numbers we can look at, but trying to normalize data across 10 different management companies, even if they're on the same version of property management software, might be a different version. They might have the reports customized differently. So we were kind of, had a one hand tied behind our back trying to do, there are so many things that we did want to look at, but either we couldn't or the time that it took to get there, it just became inefficient.
Got it. Okay. And Julie, you all manage all of your properties in-house, correct?
We do.
You do. Okay. So that kind of makes it, I guess, relatively easy compared to maybe outsourcing to the third parties.
I sure hope so. I can't imagine having 10 management companies to deal with, so I can understand how difficult that must be. I mean, we have our own challenges, and although, you said we're regional, I mean, we have properties in California and Washington, so, we do deal with the challenges of labor shortage as well as, centralization. And, I love that there's technology that's going to figure out where maintenance is spending their time and how you can, become more efficient with that and maybe downsize. But we're still dealing with human beings, so maintenance A will be completely different than how maintenance B is doing. And so I don't know about that unless they're creating robots as well. But if they are, I'm going to be first in line. But I think for us, where we find that we can centralize because of technology is more on the office side. And we probably all are using a lot of the same technology, but we brought in our business manager function. So the function at the site level, where you're dealing with a lot of the bookkeeping part of it, we centralized during the labor shortage. Because obviously you find that at your corporate level, you have less turnover, right? So we have more control. So when there's turnover at the site, at least that's one function that we can keep, centralized and in-house, that doesn't get disrupted when there's a turnover at the site level. Same thing with leasing. We haven't centralized leasing, but when we have turnover, we have people in our corporate office that can step in and work through the CRM system and with our contactless tours and stuff. It doesn't disrupt too much. But we certainly, over the last year and a half with the labor shortage, we were almost forced to centralize business managers, but I don't think we'll undo that anytime soon.
Maybe you brought up leasing. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on how technology, if it's impacted kind of your leasing activities at all? Maybe there's some newer tools over the last couple of years. I've heard of a few, automating lease documents, lease workflows, and things like that, but I'm curious if you, Julie, or any of you others have embraced newer leasing technology and how that's impacting the leasing process.
I think we were almost forced to, because of COVID, right? If we were all lagging behind before COVID, I think because of COVID, we were forced to really adopt a lot of the technology that led to, again, the contactless tours, the virtual leasing, the electronic, signatures, the CRM systems, so that you could sit in your home and, interact with your prospects and your residents through those systems. So I'm not sure we've left any, rock unturned as it relates to unused technology through the leasing process. But I will say, if we were thinking about it 2 years ago, we're in it now because we didn't have a choice.
Will you unwind any of it now that you don't have to?
No, I don't see that happening. I appreciate the streamlined process that comes from it and the more immediate data and information that we have, again, to make quicker decisions on the activity that's happening at the site.
I think the biggest benefit of, it's a horrible thing to say, benefit of COVID or a positive to come out of COVID is that it did force people to think differently. It was such a shock to the system. We deployed self-guided tours and virtual tours, and it was just that we had to, it was a necessity. But to me, bigger than just the deployment was just people thinking and being open to that it's a different world out there, and it's you just have to try new things, and sometimes they don't always work. But if you've got good analytics, you can try something and evaluate it and say, we got some benefit here or not benefit. Or in our case, because of the disparate locations, which I guess it's for everybody, some tool might be great in this region, but not in this region. And it's, again, going back to what I said earlier, it's not an all or nothing. It's trying to meet your resident wherever they are and being open to different tools that are going to get you there.
Yeah, I was just, I think they all hit on what I was going to say, which is effectively that I don't know if there's anything new or exciting that we've invested in, but some of the capital investments and some of the advancements that we saw 2 or 3 years ago that may not have had that immediate adoption either from our on-site teams or from prospective tenants. Well, those finally came home to roost during the pandemic. And I may be the only nerd in the room that would listen to this, but I sit on and I listen to the multifamily REITs earnings calls, and one of the big groups have come out and said, "Hey, look, we kind of centralized leasing during the pandemic, and I don't think we're going back." And subsequently, another group probably watching what they were doing said, "Okay, well, these guys were able to do it. We're going to try it too." So, going back to the original question about labor shortages and technology and advancements in helping supplement the on-site teams, it's not something that we at Kilroy are doing. It's something we're monitoring and seeing. But a couple of our REIT peers have come out and said that they're going to run their buildings more efficiently, and we'll keep an eye on it.
Got it. I'm curious, all of your opinions on what technology has, what particular technology has impacted the property management teams the most in a positive way.
I would say it's all the leasing tools we just talked about. A lot of it makes their job easier because it kind of takes you, here's step 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's all automated. You just have to push a button or write a response. So I think for us, it's more the CRM systems out there and the contactless tours, and I think that's made it easier for them. You can set appointments and you don't have to be there to tour them. And as much as I'd like to believe that my leasing team wants to tour, most of them don't. So they'd rather say, hey, here's the QR code to open the door or whatever, and they go in. But I think for us, we find that the more technology that we can use to make leasing easier, more streamlined for both sides, our prospects and our leasing team, we find that it's more beneficial for us.
And I would just add, for us, and this is specifically related to us because we're bringing our own property management software in-house, there are so many automations built in just for normal business operations. And again, I would call it low-hanging fruit. It's things that come with the software you get, but actually going in and digging in and really having somebody. We have 2 really great people in our team who've been on site and can look through those options and figure out, oh yeah, we should do A, B, C, and D. And maybe everybody, it wouldn't work for every property manager, but for us and our operations and our model, it works the best. So just, I think getting in there and using what's already there can give you a lot of benefit.
Well, with all this new technology, and whether it's on the property management side, specific to leasing, or really any other function, I know from talking with a number of real estate companies and working at real estate software companies, that implementation sometimes can be a little bit tricky. There's the theory and then there's the reality. And curious, Julie, you're a COO, you're a head of IT. Daniel, you have a technology company. Might be beneficial to hear about some of the unanticipated friction in rolling out new technology, and maybe sharing some thoughts on best practices, or maybe what you would have done different for the benefit of the audience here.
Well, property management always complains that they're already overworked. So then when you say, oh, well, here's a new piece of technology, they look at it as, oh, you're giving me more work. And they're not involved typically in the process. So, I'm already overworked, you're giving me more work because I have to learn this new system. And I wasn't even involved in making the decision of the system now you're forcing me to use. So what we've kind of done to overcome that is to say, okay, let's put a focus group together. If we decide that we're going to look into a certain piece of technology, or a segment of the technology, we want to bring together a focus group that includes property management, that includes corporate, that includes other divisions that are going to be utilizing the technology. So in that group, you're getting people who can give that buy-in, they buy into it. You're getting feedback from the different, end users that are going to be using it. Because it's easy for us at the corporate level to say, oh yeah, this technology is going to be great, and this is how it's going to be used. Because we're seeing it from our side. But if once we hand it off and if property management has to be involved, we may find out that it really doesn't work the way that we had anticipated. So shame on us if we do that kind of in a vacuum by not including property management, because most of the time they're the ones that's doing the data input, right? So, we recently did that with about a year ago or so when we decided on our CRM program. We could have said, okay, here's 3 different pieces of technology for the companies out there that provide it. We can just choose one and go. But when we got the property management involved, the focus group is also the implementation group. And the implementation group also becomes the trainers. So, you really have people that are committed to the technology that you decide on. And when you have someone in the property management side that has been a part of the whole process, they're going to be the ones that we also do a phase-in approach that we find that works, because when you phase in, then you're dealing with a smaller a group. And if there's, still kinks that you need to work out and stuff, it's easier to manage that over a few properties than, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 units. But we find that when property management is involved, then they become kind of the ambassadors out in the field, which is what we need. So now it's not just big bad corporate giving us more work and more technology to learn. Their peers have bought into it, and gives them, the accountability as well, and continued adoption, and of course the continued training. So we found that that's really what works for us, is getting them involved from the very beginning, so that they feel like that they're a part of it.
I would add one cautionary tale to that. Well, I totally agree, and I'll talk about the mistakes we made early on with not getting buy-in is a disaster for a technology company. I will say this. I think that given what we now recognize, there's some very critical technologies, like we were just talking about automated leasing, bots that answer phone calls for you, revenue management. I think there were a number of what we now consider to be very important technologies that would not have been well received by site staff. And I find that one of the things in our industry that sort of, from my perspective as a technologist, keeps us mired in sometimes pen and paper is the deference that and I did this myself when I was on the operations side, the deference that we sometimes give to folks on site who their jobs are hard enough as it is. So anything that certainly sounds like more work or a different system is anathema to them, even just something different. They would rather not deal with that. Their lives are difficult enough. However, I would say that once you've selected a technology, so I would not have them, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know that I would make a decision on a type of technology relying too much on folks in the field. I think that there's business reasons that are really obvious that they might not like. But I think that once you're down to selecting a vendor, I think using your folks in the field to measure the usability, the functionality, as you said, Julie, does it do what we thought it would do? That makes a lot of sense to me. But early on, we didn't understand this when we first launched the technology company, the importance of this process. And change management, I don't care what the technology is, the change management part is critical. You have to start, and I'm sure you guys do this too, you guys have to start with the why from corporate senior executives. We create videos where the CEO or the COO is talking to the folks in the field saying, this is why we deployed this technology. This is the benefit we expect to get from this. The last thing you want to do, which again we have done mistakenly, is roll out a piece of technology and be like, surprise, look at this great thing that we just handed you. It needs to be introduced in a way that that people understand the importance of it. They understand that the company's really committed to it. And they understand the why, so that as they're utilizing it, they have that in the backs of their heads. That's critical, I think, to any technology being deployed successfully.
Let me just clarify something. We don't let property management decide what systems we're going to use. So I didn't mean for it to sound like that, because corporately we have to make those decisions, because at the corporate level we see globally, what our needs are. We see how it's going to impact all divisions. We see how it's going to impact our business operations, and then what are we trying to get out of it, just like you said. But that comes from the corporate side. When we can involve property management, and even if we involve them and they say no, and we still believe it to be the right decision, we will still move forward with that. But we just find that at times that we can get that buy-in, it makes the whole process a little bit easier.
And I'll just piggyback on that. In my experience, the key to successfully deploying technology is people, right? It's which just kind of seems weird, right? Because you're going to use this tool and it's going to be great. But if you don't train those people and you don't give them an opportunity or a forum to communicate when they're struggling, when they don't understand the why, it just makes it difficult. So for us, training is key. Thorough training by somebody who knows the product, somebody who's been on site, who feels their pain and knows. And there are times where you do get pushback, and we always say, well, we're going to listen to what you say, and sometimes we'll be able to address it, and sometimes we won't. And there are both cases. There's sometimes where they will tell us something that we didn't think about, we didn't know, and we will make a change. But then there are times where you get pushed back because they've been doing it that way for 15 years and they don't want to do it differently for a myriad of reasons, and it's building that relationship and trust with your people so that they do see that you are listening and do acknowledge them when they need a change, so that the times that you don't, they know, okay, well they did listen to me for that other thing, so like this is really important. It's a compromise. We'll work together and make it successful.
That's good to hear. I mean, I think the overarching theme is, really managing that change management, giving just that right amount of ownership to the end users, to the team, while still accomplishing that business goal, which is very, I guess, a very fine line to roll out new technology. So that's all the questions we had on our panel today. Anybody in the crowd? Any questions for any of the panelists this afternoon before we wrap up?
We did a really good job.
All right. Well, I think we're the last session, so we'll wrap things up here.
Session. Huge thank you to our panelists. Thank you, guys. I know Jay has a impending appointment at Disneyland for his daughter's birthday, so happy birthday to her.